Have you ever noticed how the world can become completely quiet, but inside your mind, everything gets louder? You lie down at night, ready to sleep, and suddenly your brain decides to replay that embarrassing thing you said 3 years ago. Then you remember a conversation from yesterday. You start wondering if you said the wrong thing. What did they mean when they said that? Why haven't they replied? Are they upset with me? And before you know it, one small thought has turned into 100 different possibilities. This is overthinking, and for many people, it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like your mind has pressed play and forgotten where the stop button is. But here's the interesting part. Overthinking often disguises itself as something useful. It can feel like you're being careful, like you're preparing, like if you just think about the situation a little longer, you'll finally find the answer. But psychology makes an important distinction here. There is a difference between thinking about a problem and becoming trapped inside it. Useful reflection can help you learn and make a decision, but rumination is different. Rumination is when your mind keeps returning to the same thoughts, the same mistakes, and the same questions without actually moving you forward. You replay the past, you analyze every word, you ask yourself what you should have done differently, and then there is worry. Instead of replaying the past, your mind races into the future. What if this goes wrong? What if they leave? What if I fail? What if something terrible happens? Rumination tends to keep you stuck in what happened. Worry tends to pull you toward what might happen, but both can become forms of repetitive negative thinking base. Imagine this. You send someone a message. They usually reply quickly, but this time an hour passes, then two. At first you think, maybe they're busy, but then your mind begins working. Did I say something wrong? Maybe they're angry. Maybe they don't want to talk to me anymore. You check your phone again, and again, and again. Nothing has actually happened. You have no evidence that anything is wrong. But inside your mind, an entire story has already been created. This is one of the traps of overthinking. The situation gives you limited information. Your mind fills in the rest. And because uncertainty can feel uncomfortable, your brain keeps searching for an answer. It wants certainty. It wants to know what happened. It wants to know what will happen next. And sometimes repetitive negative thinking can feel like a way of gaining control, even when it ultimately creates more distress. So you think harder, you analyze more, you imagine every possible outcome. But here's the problem. The more possibilities you create, the more things there are to worry about. And suddenly, thinking becomes a loop. You think because you feel anxious. The anxiety makes the situation feel more important, so you think even more. And the cycle continues. Overthinking can convince you that if you just think long enough, you'll finally reach peace. But sometimes more thinking doesn't create clarity. Sometimes it only creates more noise. And this is why overthinking can be so exhausting. You're mentally running without actually going anywhere. You replay the conversation. You imagine the future. You criticize yourself. You search for certainty. And at the end of it all, you are left with the same unanswered question you started with. So how do you begin breaking the cycle? The first step is surprisingly simple. Notice the difference between solving and spiraling. Ask yourself, is this thought helping me take action? Or, am I repeating the same thought because I'm afraid of letting it go? If there is a real problem you can solve, focus on one action, not 10 possible disasters, just one action. If you made a mistake, ask yourself, what can I do about it? If you need to make a decision, gather the information you need, then make the best decision you can. Because there comes a point when thinking stops being preparation and starts becoming avoidance. But what if there is nothing you can do? What if you're waiting for an answer? What if the future is uncertain? What if you simply don't know? This is where you may need to practice something difficult. Allowing uncertainty to exist. You don't need to know what everyone is thinking. You don't need to predict every possible outcome. And you don't need to solve tomorrow's problems today. Another useful skill is learning to step back from your thoughts. Instead of saying, this is going to happen, try saying, I'm having the thought that this is going to happen. Based from American Psychological Association, small change creates distance between you and the thought. In approaches such as acceptance and commitment therapy, this is related to cognitive diffusion, changing your relationship with a thought rather than automatically treating it as a fact, because a thought is not a prophecy, a fear is not evidence, and just because your mind can imagine something doesn't mean it will happen. You don't have to fight every thought. You don't have to win an argument with your own mind. Sometimes you can simply notice the thought and let it pass. Then bring your attention back to something real. The feeling of your feet on the ground, the sounds around you, your breathing, the task in front of you, the conversation you're having, your actual life. Because overthinking has a strange way of pulling you away from the present. It sends you backward into mistakes you cannot change, or forward into futures that have not happened. But life is happening somewhere in between, here, now. So the next time your mind starts replaying the same conversation, or imagining every possible disaster, pause. Ask yourself, can I do something about this right now? If the answer is yes, take one small action. If the answer is no, maybe you don't need another hour of thinking. Maybe you need to return to the present. Because peace doesn't come from predicting everything. It doesn't come from finding an answer to every question. And it doesn't come from controlling every possible outcome. Sometimes peace begins when you realize you don't have to solve every thought your mind gives you. You can let some questions remain unanswered. You can let uncertainty exist. You can make mistakes and continue moving forward. And you can have a thought without allowing that thought to control your entire day. Your mind is a powerful tool, but it was never meant to become the place where you spend your entire life trapped. The goal is not to never think. The goal is to know when thinking is helping you and when it's time to let go. That is the psychology of overthinking.